Good morning, friends. This is the 6th Sunday of Easter. We are now at the end of the festival of Easter, and next Sunday is the celebration of the Ascension. So this has been a very intense period for learning, understanding, for just sitting quietly, thinking about what are the consequences of this whole festival. What was doing, what was happening, who was involved. There's lots to think about. There's lots to draw strength and wisdom from in this period. And so today, let's try and gather these thoughts together for this, the final Sunday in this period, before next Sunday, the Ascension. So as usual, we look for clues in the collect to try and capture the essence of this festival, of this particular Sunday in the festival. O Lord Christ, whose wondrous triumph, thy faithful people year on year do celebrate. We pray thee that as the years roll on, we also may triumph over sin, and following thy glorious example, may rise into the fullness of our spiritual heritage. Our spiritual heritage. In these few lines of the collect, we're asked to contemplate really, really important things. Firstly, the triumph of Easter, which we celebrate. We don't dwell on the activities of Good Friday. We dwell on the overall aspect of Easter and the triumph of the celebration of the resurrection and everything that means. The symbolic aspect, the mystical aspect, the aspect that we can take advantage of and enrich our lives with. And then when we recall that, we recall those lines, the fullness of our spiritual heritage. And so then we need to find out, what is our spiritual heritage? What does that mean? It means, to start with, that Christ resides in our hearts. And the great message that Jesus continually told his disciples, this, I'm telling you, my disciples, this is Jesus talking, I am talking about changing your hearts. A change of heart. I'm talking about softening your heart. And I'm also giving you an example of what does it actually feel like when you soften your heart. So, he was always very practical. Jesus always very pragmatic, always gave people sort of exercises, spiritual exercises. And what's the spiritual exercise connected with this? Would you like to find out how softened your heart is? He said, Jesus said, forgive one another. Forgive those who have trespassed against you. Big test. So, regardless of what happens, regardless of what anyone has done to you, regardless of how things have turned out in your life, regardless of how grumpy you feel, he gave us this test. Forgive one another. Before Christians became Christians, they used to describe themselves as being on the way of life. The way of life. And they used to talk about being companions on the way. That's how they spoke among themselves. The idea of Christians came much later. The label of Christians came much later. So, the way of life, with a capital L. In other words, these messages, these instructions, these spiritual exercises are not just to make you feel good, not just so you feel like goody two-shoes and maybe just a little bit superior to someone else. They are the messages of life with a capital L. This is living. This is our spiritual heritage. And that's what Easter is all about, to take us through that journey, the way of life, and then to cement it in our hearts. So in the epistle, which our brand new subdeacon read this morning, he is from the Acts of the Apostles. He is talking to people about what happened through Easter. And he's reminding them of, yes, there was drama and trauma. There was great hardship. But most of all, there was a new life and a resurrection on the other side of it. And in the Acts of the Apostles, if you care to look at them, you'll see continually this message is read. And also, in the Acts of the Apostles, whoever was speaking, sometimes Peter, sometimes other people speaking, they reminded everybody that Jesus did these extraordinary events, healed lepers, raised the dead, have people stand up who were lame, then all their limbs were perfectly sound. And these were indications not only of his great power, but the forgiveness from the Father. He tied this in with the forgiveness of sins. He asked people, do you want to be healed? You sort of think, well, that's a bit of a funny question. But really, he asked them to look into their hearts. He asked them to say to themselves, to have a little chat with themselves, why am I in this condition to begin with? And then he healed them and allowed their hearts to soften. In St. Mark, this is the very last passage of St. Mark. In fact, it's an additional piece that was added to the Gospel of St. Mark much later, and it summarizes all the things that happened after Sunday, and then the Monday and the Tuesday and so on, when all the disciples were all hidden away and very frightened. And various people then saw Jesus and came to them and said, we've seen him. And the disciples said, basically, really? I don't think so. We haven't seen him. We don't believe in it. Then he visited or travelled with, walked with two people in the country going out, and suddenly they realized who it was, and they ran back and told the disciples. The disciples said the same thing. And then Jesus appeared in their midst, and again he tried to hammer home this message, and he said, you are very hard-hearted. You did not believe what these people said, and here I am. And you're still there wondering what's going on. It was so important for the message, so important for the gospel to be transmitted by people of enlightened heart, of opened heart. And Jesus was teaching all the way through this period, right up to the Ascension, right up to the time we celebrate next Sunday. And so this is the message. This is the message of the gospel. To become a Christian is to transform your heart. To become a Christian is to be on the way of life. Deeper, richer life than just thinking about ourselves. Deeper and more expansive life than just worrying about this and that. Getting in touch with the really essential, important parts of life. That's the gospel. That is the way of life. That's becoming a Christian. I commend these ideas to you for this coming week so you can really live with them. Try them. Taste them spiritually. See how they fit. I assure you, it'll change your heart as it changes your life.